And thank you for your support of Shabbat Night Live. You make it possible for us to bring in Nehemiah Gordon, Keith Johnson. And Keith, before the break, we were talking about how all of us in this room and Michael Rood all agree that there's a lot more to the Nicene Creed than what is originally written. That's why Michael wrote his own version of it and kind of filled in some of the blanks. And that's what you guys are doing with Hebrew Gospel Pearls. And Keith, you were getting ready to say something just before the break. What were you want to offer here?
It's interesting. In 1987, I took my first tour to Israel. And I remember on the last day of the tour that I decided that I wanted to, they gave us free time. So you could go and actually, walk to these different places. And I remember I decided I wanted to go from Gethsemane, where, he would have prayed that prayer. And I walked through the old city and did all of these things. And at that point, I thought, in 1987, I got it figured out. I understand it. I've got the life of Yeshua. I've got it. It was just as clear as day. And then to be able to be in the journey that all of us are on, where you come to a place where you realize there's more, or there's some other aspect that you need to deal with. And again, the focus for me was this. I heard something on 60 Minutes one time where they said that most preachers preach from the epistles. And they went on to say they did a survey, and they said that that basically most preachers stay away from the words of Jesus because they're too radical. Instead, they go to Paul, who gives the explanation, or the theological explanation, for what Yeshua's life was. And for me, that was really saddening. So when Nehemiah came to me, folks haven't heard this story. If you don't know, Nehemiah is Jewish. I come from a Christian background, and we had decided to do some study together. I'd asked him to help me to better understand my Hebrew Bible so I could read it for myself, etc. We went through this long process, and he said, listen, I've got some rules. And really, there were two rules that he brought up that were really significant. One, no attempt to convert. You don't try to convert me. I don't try to convert you. Number two, none of that Jesus stuff. None of that New Testament stuff, Scott. He said none of that. And then he calls me and he whispers and he says, Keith, I'd like to change one of the rules. And I'm thinking, which one? Either one, I win. He wants to get converted, or he wants to talk about Yeshua. Which one? and he said, I'd like to study the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew with you according to this ancient manuscript. And again, that's been for years. The reason I'm bringing this up is that between what we've done and what Michael has done, it's almost like that during this pandemic, we're in a special dispensation. It's almost like, I've begged Nehemiah for years and years and years, bring him out of the vault, bring him out of the vault. No, I'm too busy. I'm working on this one. And he is working on some really, really important things. Can I make a plug? He and Michael did a show, and I hate that I don't know the title, but I've watched it. It was called The Ancient Bible something. Can you help me with it, Scott? What was it called?
Oh, yeah, it was part of the series from the Messianic Prophecies. It was one of the, yes. we titled one of the episodes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Something about the ancient Bible.
Resurrecting the Ancient Bible.
Exactly. Resurrecting the Ancient Bible. I watched it, Scott. After I got done, I called Nehemiah because, he doesn't watch this stuff. People probably don't know this. I'll say, Nehemiah, you said such, and he says, what are you talking about? This was amazing. I didn't watch it. I said, make you and your wife sit down and watch it. Why did I say that? Because what Michael did is he got Nehemiah to bring to the surface really the understanding of this book that we call the Bible. He's done the same thing with these New Testament manuscripts. So what I want to say is this. Michael did something, has been working on it for years and years and years, decades, the chronological Gospels. I really encourage people. I don't know what you guys have. You guys are always coming up with something in ways of what's available with the chronological Gospels, but I really encourage people to get that. If you take the chronological Gospels, you take what we're doing with Hebrew Gospel Pearls, you bring all this information together. You read a prayer to our Father. You read the Greek Jesus versus the Hebrew Yeshua. And what you're getting a chance to do is to call what I say, instead of listening to the radio, you get to watch HDTV. You get to watch Yeshua's life in DTV, because we're bringing all of these aspects together. And Nehemiah, I don't know if we have time to do this, but could you just do one thing for folks? Scott, here's the book that a lot of people know, the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. This is George Howard's book. He had 9 manuscripts. Nehemiah has found 28 manuscripts. When I look in this book, which I did a whole series on, the red letter series on Yeshua, I'm just using this manuscript. Now Nehemiah comes to the table and he says, look, there are 28 manuscripts and 20 of them deal with this section. I find something right away. Can we go to the first verse, Nehemiah? Would you just go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, Scott? Do we have time to do this? I want people to understand.
Before we get to
a little bit
5:3,
about the significance of this.
I want to bring something
We get
from
to the
Matthew.
first verse. Hold on.
Can we do
get
something
to the
before
first
that?
verse. Huh?
Can we do something before we get to 5:3?
No, I got to get this in. I got to get this in.
Okay.
Listen,
All right, then.
Scott, we get to the first verse, and in Howard's book, there's parentheses.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And I say to myself, wait, there's parentheses. Oh, boy, Nehemiah. Why are there parentheses? And is there a difference that we have in terms of what you have access to? Now, would you please let people know just a little bit about the significance of that?
And is that 5:3 you're talking about, or?
Yes.
I think it's in 5:4, the big issue there.
No, 5:3 is the one where there's parentheses.
Okay, so tell me what you're referring to there. Blessed are the low-spirited, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven?
Yes.
Okay. And remind me what the issue is there.
So George Howard, so I tried to give him the softball. He doesn't want to hit the softball, Scott, so I'll have to take another couple minutes. So when we open up George Howard's main manuscript doesn't have this verse.
Oh, okay.
Really?
I got you.
Okay, well, that's news to me.
Now,
So
stop 1 second.
Yeah.
Since he gave me the minute, can I just take one more minute?
Go ahead. Yeah.
There's another significant thing that we're doing that up until this time, people have not had access to. Nehemiah has found a way to get the manuscript itself, the Hebrew that's there that's unpointed. He's actually gone to an expert in Israel and got the manuscript pointed so that there are vowel points there. That helps in terms of reading. But the point is that he's got manuscripts, more than one, that have 5.
All right. So in this verse, George Howard looked at 9 manuscripts, and he had one lone manuscript that had verse 3, and the other 8 manuscripts did not have verse 3. And so he puts a little note in what's called a critical apparatus. He records a little note that verse 3 is in this manuscript in Leiden and in Holland. And I go look at all the 20 manuscripts that were preserved on this section. There's 28 overall, but for this particular verse, or this section, there are 20 manuscripts. And I find it's true that manuscript A has it, what he calls manuscript A, the manuscript from Leiden, but I find an additional 6 manuscripts that have it. So now we've got, instead of 1 manuscript, it's 7. So
Yes.
7 manuscripts have it. And what I found is we have these 2 families. I call them Group A and Group B manuscripts. Because A is actually in Group A, the one from Leiden. So there's the Leiden family, or the Group A family, and there's the Group B family. And it's not just this one verse that all the Group A manuscripts agree about, and the lack of this verse that all the Group B manuscripts. It's other things as well, and that's what I actually wanted to get to, which is in verse 4. Can I give him that, Keith?
Absolutely.
Before I get to that, let's back up a little bit. So Shem Tov was this rabbi who in the year 1380 copies the Gospel of Matthew in Hebrew as part of a larger work that he wrote called Even Bochan. We don't have the original manuscript that Shem Tov himself wrote in 1380. We have copies of copies of copies, and that's what the 28 are. Among the 28, some of those are, there's at least 2 of them, for example, that are what are called epitomes, or they're abbreviations, right? They only bring what they consider to be the important parts, or the important sections. So you have these different witnesses to the Shem Tov's Matthew, and those fall into 2 categories, what I call Group A and Group B. And so the Group A manuscripts have verse 3, the Group B manuscripts don't. Then we get to verse 4, and we find the group, all the manuscripts, both Group A and Group B have verse 4, but some of the manuscripts don't have verse 5. Oh. And so the Group A manuscripts have verse 5, the Group B manuscripts don't have verse 5. And then when the Group A manuscripts have verse 5, it's before verse 4. So it grows verse 1, 2, they all have 1 and 2, right? 1, 2, 3, 5, 4 in some of the manuscripts, right? Now, why would this happen? This is a classic thing known in the study of manuscripts, is when something is missing from a family of manuscripts and another family has it. And you have a famous example is the short ending and the long ending of Mark. Right? If you look at modern translations, there's a whole section at the end of Mark in brackets, and they'll say that some manuscripts don't have this. So what tends to happen when you have a verse like that or a section is somebody writes it in the margin, and the next scribe comes along, copies it. He doesn't know where to put it, right? He doesn't know exactly where to put it. He knows it's somewhere on that line. So he puts in this case, verse 4 after verse 5. So George Howard had hypothesized. We didn't discover Hebrew Matthew. People are like, how did you discover Hebrew Matthew, Nehemiah? Were you in a cave somewhere? No, George Howard in 1987 published a book called The Hebrew Gospel, or originally it was called The Gospel of Matthew According to a Primitive Hebrew Text. It was later revised in 1995, The Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, which is, I suppose, a much better marketing title, but I like the original title better. And he had an hypothesis. He looked at all the different manuscripts of Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew, which were copies of the original from 1380, of this original copy, right? Copies of the copy. And he said that if you look at some of them, they're very different from the Greek. And then you look at other ones and they're very similar to the Greek. And how do you explain this? And his explanation was that the original manuscript that Shem Tov had copied from some other source that we don't know, right? He's copying a Hebrew version that existed in the Jewish community, that the original one of Shem Tov that he copied was very different from the Greek. And that over time, there's a process of what he called assimilation. That you'd have people reading, and as they read, they said, well, wait a minute, where's verse 3? I know verse 3 is supposed to be there because I've read it in the Greek, or I read it in the Latin, or I read it in some other Hebrew version. And so what do? Okay, I'll retranslate it, right? So there was a process of assimilating the Hebrew Matthew to match the Greek. Right? We see this in manuscripts all the time. We just did a series about Torah scrolls, and we saw examples of that. So this happens even in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, that there's this official version. In the case of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, it's the Ben Asher Codex, what's called the Tiberian Masoretic text. We have a text that's different. We got to make it fit. How do we make it fit? We change it. Right? Now, sometimes when you change it, you're actually fixing it. Sometimes when you change it, you're breaking it. Right? You have something that you think is the correct form, and you're changing the text. This is what's called textual criticism. So the hypothesis Howard had is that the original Hebrew Matthew is very different from the Greek, and over time it was made more and more similar. That was a theory, it was an hypothesis, whatever you want to call it. He didn't have definitive proof. Keith and I found the smoking gun. So let me show you the smoking gun. And we'll get to one in Matthew chapter 5 in the Beatitudes, but this is one that isn't even that important in a sense, right? It's not some crucial verse, right? At least from my perspective. It's Matthew chapter 2, verse 16. It says in Azra'a Hordus, this is talking about how the Magi had gone to Herod, and then they go to Bethlehem, and then he feels like he's been deceived by them because they don't come back and tell him where they found the Messiah. Azra'a Hordus, and then Herod saw, and then in some manuscripts of Hebrew Matthew, it says, Sherimu oto hakosmim, that the Magi deceived him, which is virtually identical what you have in the Greek. So no big revelation here in the Hebrew, exactly what you'd expect. Except some manuscripts of Hebrew Matthew have, then Herod saw, Shera'uho toha kasmim, that the Magi saw him. What does that mean, they saw him? Maybe they saw him for what he was. We come up with all kinds of clever explanations, right? Right. Then Herod saw it, the Magi saw him. That's bizarre, a little bit strange. So what happened? So to me, studying the Hebrew text, it's obvious what happened. The Aleph and the Mem, the two letters that are different between those two versions, are graphically very similar. And there was a scribe who was copying, and instead of copying a Mem that they deceived him, he copied by mistake the letter Aleph, that they saw him. Okay, no question that that's what happened between the different Hebrew Matthew manuscripts. Here's the real, and this isn't a big discovery either. Here's the big discovery. I found a manuscript that George Howard didn't know about. And let's back up. So there's the Group A and the Group B. So the group, I think it's the Group A manuscripts in this case, one of the groups has, instead of the word sherimu, that they deceived him, a completely different Hebrew word, shela'agu. They scoffed at him. So what's going on here? This is very strange. One group has they deceived him, one has they scoffed at him. And one of those is originally what Shem Tov copied, and one is not, right? Which one is? I don't know, right? I'm trying to find out. One of those is closer to the Greek. That they deceived is really closer to is really more dissimilar to the Greek, and they scoffed at him. That fits the Greek, and it fits the Latin really well, especially. So what I found is the Smoking Gun. It's a manuscript of Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew that Howard didn't know about, in which a scribe came along, and it said, then Herod saw that the Magi saw him, took a pen, crossed out the word saw, and above it wrote, scoffed at. So Howard, and I can show you this here up on the screen, we'll show you, I've put a red box around it. You can see it says the word shera'u, that they saw, and it was changed to that they scoffed. So originally it said that they deceived. Somebody said, well, wait a minute, they deceived. It's supposed to be they scoffed. That's what we have in our Latin, that's what we have in the Greek has that sense as well. And they changed it, and here you can see the actual manuscript where it was changed. And so we had actually 3 stages. It originally said that they deceived. It was accidentally changed to that they saw. And then somebody said that they saw doesn't make sense, so they changed it to a different Hebrew word, that they scoffed. And that was a theory up until now. That was Howard's theory. We now have the Smoking Gun, the manuscript where it was done.
Wow.
It's the missing link. It's the type of thing you can't even hope for in textual studies, and we found it.
Go ahead,
Hey, let me say this. This is why I think this is significant. Nehemiah, as a Jewish scholar, is giving a gift to people who would say, it's not the same belief, it's not the same, but yet it's access to information that they wouldn't have. The person who did the pointing, a Jewish man in Israel who takes the point, he puts the vowel points in there. Michael asked for something, Scott, and I want to just make sure that we get this in before we get to the end of this. Michael asked, Keith, is there an interlinear that would take the Hebrew with the pointing and the English? And what we've done is we've done that. So I want to make sure that for the biblical Beatitudes, people know they can have access to that, because that will allow them to study along with us. Nehemiah's come up with this great system where we have a public version and a plus version, and maybe you can talk about that. But what this will allow people to do, Scott, is to read along with us, to see we have an English translation, the NASB, we have the Hebrew there with the vowel pointing, and then an interlinear that gives you the English word connected to the Hebrew, and then a translation, which I call the KJV. Ready for this? Drum roll, please. The Keith Johnson version, based on what we have. So I want to make sure that they know that they have that. And Nehemiah, please let them know about how we go deeper.
So what we're doing is we're really, like Keith said, we're going kind of in depth on some of these things. And that's just like a taste of the type of thing that we're finding. That we look at the text and we're like, okay, George Howard has something in parentheses. What's the story behind that? There's a whole story behind that, right? There's a whole textual history behind that, and we're sharing that with people, letting them decide for themselves, what you want to do with these pearls, right? And so what we did is we're doing an episode in each section, and in this case, we've slowed down and done on each beatitude. We do what we call Hebrew Gospel Pearls on nehemiaswall.com and bfainternational.com. And then we also have what we call Hebrew Gospel Pearls Plus. For those who want to go a little bit deeper, get a little bit more information, for those who support my ministry and become part of bfainternational.com, they've got the Hebrew Gospel Pearls Plus. And we have people who just listen to the Plus, people who just listen to the non-Plus episode, the public episode, and that's fine. There's a lot of information there. It's sometimes it's Keith calls it the fire hose. You turn on the fire hose. And
you got to put on a hard hat, Scott.
Yeah, sounds
just like a fire hose of information, trying to drink from it. There's another example I just want to bring really quick. We have like a minute left. I can't even bring it. There's this one in the Beatitudes, which is so cool, where some manuscripts have blessed are those who wait, and others have blessed are those who weep. And the Greek has blessed are those who mourn. And we have the smoking gun that we share in the Hebrew Gospel Pearls, where a scribe came along and actually changed it. We can see in the manuscript that he changed it. From blessed are those who wait to blessed are those who weep. So up until now it was, okay, we're inferring this happened. It was an hypothesis, a theory that happened. I have the smoking gun where you can actually see the scribe changed it from one to the other. This is cutting edge stuff, Scott. It's exciting stuff that I am so blessed that I've had the opportunity to do this in the Hebrew Gospel Pearls.
And, you know, I get to cheat because I can see it right here, but we're not going to show it. You guys have to go and see it for yourselves. But this is great. And the best part is, like both of you said, this doesn't change anyone's faith. It adds to it. Like you said, Keith, it opens the door, turns radio into HD television, as it were, to understand these things better and see Yeshua deeper, enter his time and his culture and see what he said, and then it just all seems to make sense. And that's what we want to do, is make the words of Yeshua make sense. And so I want to thank you both for doing what you do.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here on Shabbat Night Live for this series. All right, and thank you for joining us. And again, thank you for supporting Shabbat Night Live, and I encourage you to support BFA International and for supporting NehemiahsWall.com and watching the Hebrew Pearls with these guys. It's a great stuff. I encourage you to get it, and we'll see you next time on Shabbat Night Live. Shavua Tov.